In this next section, we're going to go over the various certifications that relate to indoor environmental quality and health and well-being. You may have noticed in the right-hand corner of several slides that there's a logo for LEED, Fitwel, or WELL. On these slides, we'll discuss the strategies that are talked about in these certifications. The next section that we're going into, we dive further into these and we address the requirements that are required for Fitwel, WELL, and LEED certification. If you do not plan to certify your building, you can skip this section and move on to our resources and case studies section. So without further ado, let's get started.
So in this section, we're going to just talk a little bit more about some of the requirements for LEED. These are focused on existing buildings. This is the version 4. By the time you're watching this, there might have a different version, but some of the requirements typically remain somewhat similar. If you're interested in pursuing LEED and you want to have kind of general idea, what are the typical things that relate to indoor environmental quality? We did mention a lot of those different strategies throughout the webinar, but just to give you a high-level overview, there's a couple of prereqs that you have to meet. You need to make sure you have minimal indoor quality performance, so you have to do some testing to prove that. You need to make sure that you do not allow smoking in the building, that you have a green cleaning policy in place. So those are you have to do those to even qualify for LEED. And then you can get certain credits for doing different strategies, including having an indoor quality management program in place, having enhanced indoor quality strategies that you're adopting. One, you can get credits for giving tenants more thermal comfort, interior lighting, so make sure they have lighting controls. Also, if they have good daylight and views, that will also can help you get a point. On the green cleaning front, if you're doing an assessment, if you're making sure your products and equipment meet certain standards, and if your equipment meets certain standards, you can also get different points. If you have an integrated pest management plan, you can also in place, you can also get a point for that, and conducting an occupant comfort survey can also give you points. So this is more for the initial LEED Bomb certification, and then next we're going to talk about kind of ongoing recertification strategies that you'd have to do to maintain that certification. So LEED now has they've developed an ARC platform, and their kind of system and tool to track recertifications is a lot more streamlined and easy to use. It costs less money as well, but you do have to maintain that recertification on an annual basis. Some of the things, so they have certain base points that you can get from doing an initial LEED certification, and that includes indoor quality thermal comfort, interior lighting, and day lighting and views. They can get up to 4 points. There's still certain prerequisites you need to meet, like the minimal indoor quality performance and having the smoking policy in place. And then some of the things you have to track on an annual basis is that you have to do at least one occupant comfort survey with the building occupants, and you need to do an annual indoor quality testing for CO2 and VOC's concentration to make sure that your building is meeting certain standards for indoor quality. Another certification type that we wanted to talk about is the WELL Building Standard, because it's very related to health and well-being and indoor quality. So it's an important one to mention on this webinar. WELL is a performance-based system for measuring, certifying, and monitoring features of the built environment that impact human health, well-being through air, water, nourishment, light, fitness, comfort, and mind. Some of the things to think about in terms of WELL, it's still a fairly expensive certification. So I think that for a lot of our clients, it's being cost prohibitive. WELL, I think, is working on a more streamlined certification path that would be cheaper. but from our experience, it's being more prominent on new construction than for existing buildings. And one of the reasons is because of the cost and how stringent it is. We've had cases where some of our peers pursued WELL certification and they failed their indoor quality assessment multiple times. So it's just something to think about, and I think it's great that we're trying to third-party certify and make sure the building is as healthy as it can be, especially because that has a huge effect on occupant productivity. So we'll talk, Kelly's going to talk a little more about some of the aspects of the WELL building standard on the next slides.
The three main features of indoor environmental quality that WELL focus on are air, comfort, and light. You can see from the scorecard that certain strategies have a P, which is a precondition or required, and others have an O, which is an optimization that can help you take the precondition a little bit further. As you can see, there are a lot of different strategies that address indoor environmental quality, so I won't go through all of them. However, it is good to note that many of them overlap with LEED, such as green cleaning and pesticide management. However, others are a little bit more stringent than LEED and take it into a lot more detail. Green cleaning has a bit more in-depth protocol than LEED does, and also fundamental material safety goes into more depth and has very specific numbers that you must meet for pollutants in your space. So then the next one is light, and that it also has a lot of overlaps with LEED. But I would say one of the main differences is focusing on circadian rhythm and more how your body interacts with the light as opposed to energy efficiency. So you'll notice a lot of WELL features tend to focus more on health and not sustainability. So sometimes there is a trade-off between efficiency and health. The next is comfort. So these are all the things that we talked about, like ergonomics, ADA accessible, smells and olfactory comfort, and sound reducing. So this goes a little bit further than LEED does to focus more on comfort of your occupant in terms of the whole building interaction. So the way they interact with noise, the way they interact with the smells of the space. So WELL is much more focused on health and indoor environmental quality.
So another certification that's also available if you want to get your building certified related to health and well-being is Fitwel. This has been a more popular certification for existing buildings because it's a lot more cost effective. Typically the registration fee I think is $500 and the cost for certification is about $6,500. A lot of property teams can do that working house, or you can bring a consultant to help. I think for Verdani partners, we typically just charge an hourly rate, and we do a not to exceed, and depending on the number of hours, will cost more or less if you need our support. But it's really straightforward. You can get it done in like a month, so you can get it through the process fairly quickly. Some of the requirements that Fitwel has, and to define if your building is a good candidate, one of the things is if you have a good walk score, like 90 or more, that that should be a good candidate for Fitwel certification. You need to make sure the building is smoke-free, that's also asbestos-free, and making sure that all asbestos have been properly abated throughout the building. You also need to make sure you have a indoor quality policy in place, which there's a lot of synergies with LEED on that one. They want to make sure you have a green purchasing policy, and that's becoming a best practice, so a lot of buildings have that. You also need to have provide separate ventilation in all areas with chemical use or storage, so you want to make sure you have proper ventilation for your chemical storage. Just to continue talking about some of the Fitwel requirements that relate to indoor quality, this is not all the requirements, this is just the portions that relate to air quality. So for your tenant spaces, they also want to maximize natural daylight, so showing that you can provide natural daylight in a majority of the workplace. Also views, that's also a synergy with LEED because LEED also has those requirements. Operable shading, provide operable shading in all regularly occupied workplaces. Some of those are just points, so it's not a prerequisite. So even though you might not have this in your building, doesn't mean that you're not a good candidate. It just means you don't get those points. Active workstations, so provide access to sufficient active workstations. So they're workstations that allow you to have some physical activity while you're working. In terms of shared spaces, so bathroom cleaning schedule, adopt a regular cleaning schedule for the restrooms, provide permanent educational sites promoting hand washing in restrooms, that's an easy one. Refrigerator and freezer cleaning, adopt a regular cleaning schedule for the insurers of refrigerators and freezers in break areas, that's also a no-brainer. Quiet room, provide a dedicated quiet room accessible to all regular occupants that can be used in private. So that's also a straightforward one.